Good afternoon. This is Kristen Muzzy. I am your host of Riveting Connections, Connect and Collaborate Radio, where we bring you top issues from the manufacturing industry. We bring leaders, movers, shakers that are making a difference in the manufacturing industry. And we're so glad to have you today joining us. We've got a great guest, somebody that I've known now for almost, well, I guess I can't stretch it to a whole year, but we've got Sean Covi, who is a certified financial planner for 23 years, something that I wanted to be when I graduated college, but never made it. And Sean is a longtime resident here in Denver. But more importantly, Sean is just an outstanding individual. Everybody that I introduce Sean to, people that I talk with that know Sean, can't say enough good things. So you have an impeccable reputation. But how Sean and I got connected was actually through a LinkedIn connection. And I'm always I'm a huge advocate for manufacturing and trying to find ways to solve problems in manufacturing. And here at Connect and Collaborate Network, obviously we're focused on the power of connecting and collaborating, and that's exactly what we did via the LinkedIn connection. And what intrigued me is some solutions that you bring specifically to the manufacturing community that benefit them greatly. And we're going to talk about that today. Some big savings that a lot of manufacturers don't know that they can obtain because it's either too difficult, they don't know. And you say something, you say, you don't know what you don't know until you find out, right? So welcome, Sean. It's great to have you here on the show today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So first of all, Sean, tell us a little bit about you and how did you get involved in this whole manufacturing realm? Because this is very different from what you've done the majority of your career, right?
It is, yes. I've been a practicing certified financial planner working with individuals and businesses, managing assets, reaching goals, and reducing taxes. And about 15 years ago, I went more towards the tax side. I work very closely with colleagues who are CPAs, enrolled agents, and accountants. And I found that there are areas that some of them don't focus on because their practice are very niche-driven.
Okay.
So I identified those areas and decided that I really enjoyed working in those, so I developed relationships with these other practitioners where I could provide these services that they don't. And what I found is that some people are open to knowing that there are things they don't know. Others are not. And that's why I put that statement out there. You don't know what you don't know until you find out.
That's right. And being open.
Exactly.
Open to it, being open to new ideas, right?
Exactly. And just because you don't know something doesn't mean it won't hurt you or that you couldn't benefit if you were
This is
open.
true.
So that's the being open part.
Yeah. I think one of the things that causes the greatest fear is how much do I have to invest of my time or my people's time in order to maybe get a savings of some sort. But some of the services that you're providing or educating people, the community on, are pretty phenomenal because the investment of their time and their people's time is very minimal, and yet the savings are very large. Can you? So you offer this whole host of services, and I'm going to focus on one to get us started, because I'm super passionate about helping our manufacturers solve this workforce skills gap issue. Our unemployment is at 2%, and some people are saying that it's actually less than that in the manufacturing community. So they're vying for a labor pool, and they're stealing from one another, not stealing, but they're pulling labor from one another, and there's a real shortage. But there's an opportunity out there to reach out to other demographics that may not otherwise know or think that they have an opportunity in the manufacturing community. So you have a tax credit called WOTC, WOTC. Can you tell us about that?
I can, yeah. It stands for Work Opportunity Tax Credit, and it was started after World War II primarily to get veterans coming back into the workforce. Then in the 80s and 90s, it was expanded significantly to cover other types of target groups that were traditionally underemployed. That may be people who live in empowerment zones, summer youth workers, some types of individuals or families who are receiving government aid. And sometimes even ex-felons.
Okay.
So when I say that, some people start to think, well, those may not be the type or caliber of individual that I want to hire. And in some cases, they may be accurate because when people are chronically underemployed or unemployed, there's usually an underlying reason. But that net gets cast pretty wide, and there are many high caliber, high quality individuals that bring this type of a benefit. And although it's a tax credit, really the way I explain it to employers is it's essentially a benefit to them to offsetting their cost of training, because hiring and training and reducing turnover are significant expenses.
Absolutely.
So by having this as a benefit, a financial benefit, that can offset some of those costs, which therefore allows more other money to go towards profitability, increasing earnings.
What does it look like as far as tax savings? Let's say that I'm interested, I'm a manufacturer, I've got 20 open positions right now, right? And somebody's approached me, and that there's a pipeline of, let's say, one of these groups, okay, one of these demographics, but I don't even know where to start. So if I work with you, walk me through the process. How do you take me through to show me what my tax credit would look like, and what the reporting is, and et cetera? How do I get my credit?
Certainly. This program isn't really a tool that allows a business to narrow down into one specific underemployed target group.
Okay.
Rather, what it is a tool that allows an employer, whether they're using their own HR group to identify candidates, or maybe they're outsourcing that to a staffing firm, whatever it may be, it allows them to have every single candidate they look at be scanned to identify whether or not they belong to one of these target groups.
Do I have to buy a software application to do this?
The business will have a subscription to a software application.
Okay.
Traditionally, companies that provide this service, because it's been around for decades, will typically only do it for businesses that hire 500 or more employees a year, because it was done via paper, it was cumbersome, and there was a lot of loss along the way. So what we've done, and it's not me personally, it's one of the groups that I affiliate with, they created software so that it can be automated in the background. It literally takes less than 20 seconds to enter an applicant's name and an email address, click send, and everything's done online via smartphone or via computer. Or if they're hiring individuals that perhaps are not as well connected as most of us, they can even set up a terminal in the office where they're hiring, where they can just let people enter the data online there. Once they enter the data, there are 8 or 9 standard questions. Then we do real-time background checks to find out if they answered yes to this, are they a member of this particular group based on publicly available data. If we get a response that alters or differs, a pop-up comes up in real time that says, please check your answer to question number XYZ, and they have the opportunity to then figure out, ooh, is that a little bit different? Should I need to look into it further? The employer is never told what questions the individual answered, so the employer doesn't know what target group they're coming from.
Gotcha.
That encourages honesty if the applicant is at all concerned that they may be judged for what that background is. But we do tell them what credit they come with to answer your question. So once we've identified they're part of a target group, we're able to say this person comes with this much of a credit, and it ranges from a low of $900 to a high of $9,600
Per year?
for per hire.
Per hire.
Correct. So once someone's hired, that's a one-time credit, and it goes for every employer they go to as long as they're still a member of that target group.
And this is a tax credit.
Dollar for dollar reduction in taxes owed.
That's huge.
Yes, it's pretty large. Yeah. On average, we find about $2,400 in tax credits per qualifying individual. Roughly 10% of the country fits into these target groups. So 1 out of 10 people bring this tax credit. Certain industries have higher capture rates. Manufacturing tends to be one of them. So they may end up with 20 or 30% of their candidate workforce bringing a credit, sometimes more.
That's significant.
It is.
That's really, really significant. And the reason a lot of the manufacturers are not doing this is simply because they don't know what they don't know, or they've heard about it and they think it's too cumbersome.
Correct. Yeah. In the past, the only company that I'm aware of that's doing the software subscription and real-time data checks, Growth Management Group out of Michigan, and they have set this up so that it is not cumbersome. So literally, it can be done in a matter of seconds. Very little ongoing management of the software program. They just have to indicate once an employee goes from candidate to hire, and once they're hired, when have they hit 120 or 400 hours cumulatively worked for that employer. That's it. GMG does everything else in the background. So it's not cumbersome at all. But in the past, it has been. So companies that may have considered it may have ruled it out. But we've kind of turned the tables on that. So it's really available to more.
And it's not just for manufacturing, but since I focus on manufacturers, but it is available to every industry.
Correct.
Right?
If someone hires one person a year, they can use the software. It starts at $19 a month for a subscription. For companies that hire hundreds a year, it may be hundreds of dollars a month. But in the scale of things, it's still significantly less than the amount of tax credits they're eligible to receive.
Yeah, and it's great to get those demographics, to work. So now we can start recruiting maybe from some different pools, because the unemployment is so low right now. We need to think outside of the box, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So you've got a lot of other cost remediation services and tools that you're focused in manufacturing. Can you share a few with us? Like, what's the top one that you're really excited about, jazzed about?
I can. And I don't know if there's any one that I'm really jazzed about because every business is different. Sure. And what I find is that out of the dozen or so tools that I'm able to bring to the fore, maybe only 2 or 3 apply. And those 2 or 3 are different in every single situation. So I'm happy to cover several that I use regularly that are useful.
I want to hear more.
And some companies, the larger manufacturers that might be owned by national companies or publicly traded companies, they may already be doing some of these, but it's your smaller, more regional firms that perhaps don't have access to other practitioners who utilize this. So one would be a Section 41 tax credit. That is for companies that do any type of scientific testing before they bring a product to market. Okay. So manufacturers quite often qualify under quite a few of those definitions. Installing new machinery, upgrading technology, manufacturing a product itself.
And most people don't think that would qualify. I mean, installing a new, for example, if somebody's investigating to add a new additive manufacturing machine, 3D printing, right, which is continuing to grow. So if I go out and I want to bring in an additive printer, right, then I may qualify for this tax credit.
Generally speaking, about 25% of expenditures on this type of qualifying research expenditure, QRE as it's called, can come back in the form of a tax credit. We find more often, though, than the actual cost of equipment, it's the cost of the salaries of the engineers that are running or installing the equipment. So quite often, payroll is one of the biggest determining factors of how much of a credit someone gets. So that's one of the factors we look at, is the size of payroll that a manufacturing company has.
That's pretty big. Yeah. So as long as they're capturing how much time and equate that into salary, right?
Correct. And that's what our group does. We have specialists that come in, we talk to management, interview a few people, find out exactly what percentage of time is spent on qualifying activities. And this is something that can change every single year. So where WOTC was a single time credit for hiring a new employee, this is something that every single year, a company that qualified once likely will qualify again and again and again, although the exact number will change each year. For companies that have never taken this benefit, they can go back 3 years retroactively.
Nice.
So quite often, if they've never done this, this is something that ends up putting a multi-six-figure savings into their pocket almost immediately.
That's significant.
Yeah.
That can be really, really significant.
Yeah.
So tell us about another.
Yeah, another one would be utilizing a captive insurance company. Many times manufacturers have a significant amount of premium they pay for different types of insurance.
A lot of insurance.
Exactly.
A lot.
Whether it be property and casualty, it could be other types of errors and emissions, safety, it could be fleet, auto insurance for a fleet of vehicles. Once a business is spending over 6 figures a year, quite often once they get to $250,000 and up, what they're doing is they're spending that money in pocketing, or they're lining the pockets of commercial insurers. So all the large names that you recognize, they're the ones who are making a profit off of it. And quite often they're paying premiums that are covering other companies that have worse risk ratios than their own company.
Right.
So what we do is we're able to come in and identify what risks are relevant to them, what other risks that maybe they don't have coverage for now that could be useful to them, and then we identify whether they could benefit from creating their own insurance company. Hence it's called a captive insurance company. So they own it. We have a team that prices the risk, and they come in, and now the company is paying premiums to their own insurance company. And over time, as long as they've managed it effectively, the loss ratio is effective, all of the profit that they were giving to a commercial insurer, they're now retaining within this new entity that's owned by the owners of the manufacturing company.
But if I don't want to take on that huge amount of risk, right, there's also reinsurance.
Correct.
That I can add to it, right?
Correct. And the biggest risk of owning any insurance company is a single large claim that could wipe them out. So what we do is that when we identify those, we buy reinsurance as a stop loss, so that should that claim ever occur, we haven't bankrupted the captive insurance company. We pay a small portion of the premiums they're collecting to this other company who can then take on the larger amounts of risk. So it's just another way to retain a profit center. And I think many people are motivated by the tax savings. For smaller captives, when I say smaller, paying up to $2.3 million a year in premium, that's considered small. All of that is a tax deduction to the manufacturer in the current year.
So up to $2.3 million.
If they're a larger manufacturer, they can still deduct larger amounts of premiums, but there are different ratios as to how much they have to include back as income. Rather than boring your listeners to tears with that, just recognize that generally for smaller ones, $2.3 million a year of premium is tax deductible, and quite a lot of that over time ends up being profit.
So again, who would, of our listeners, who would want to investigate this? And I heard you say it was like $250,000 in insurance.
That's ideal. If they spend over $250,000 or more in insurance premium, they want to look at this. The minimum is $100,000. They may or may not be candidates. We would look at that with my team of experts and advise them.
And the insurance, would that include workers' comp? Property,
health insurance as well.
Health insurance, everything.
Yes, so you start looking at health insurance premiums for hundreds of employees, you're typically over 6 figures.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big deal. Well, very interesting. So how much do you see on average, percentage-wise, are people saving, like in the first year and the second year?
It really depends. Some people out, captives are not unknown. So there are people out there who could be financial advisors, insurance agents, attorneys, other types of advisors who are promoting the tax benefit only. And some people really are motivated by that. Unfortunately, they should not do it solely for tax benefits. The tax benefit is secondary.
Other reasons, right?
Other reasons come first. But when they're focused on providing the right types of coverages, yes, anyone who is spending money on current insurance premiums is going to really get a benefit long term for them. Claims generally tend to be 40 to 60% of the premiums paid in, so there's a pretty significant profit margin when you price the premiums effectively.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Just another way of saving money, but also putting more of the control back in the hands of the employer, right? Only insuring that which I may have a risk in, right?
Well, it goes beyond that. There are many risks. This goes back to the statement, you don't know what you don't know until you find out. There are many risks that businesses don't know that even exist for them. There's a very low chance that it ever happens, but if they do, they can be devastating. So oftentimes what we'll do in a captive is, in addition to helping them with the risks they're currently paying premiums to commercial carriers, we're going to add in other risks and price that for them. And in the event that those ever happen, they have coverage. If they never happen, that's premium that they collected that's now pure profit
like
for their captive.
Like a security breach?
That's one of them.
That's a big one, right?
Exactly.
And I don't know how many people are really covered on that today.
You would really have to have
I'm looking at the small and medium-sized manufacturer.
You would have to have a very good insurance agent, and there are some out there who would have said, let's look at this, this, and this.
Exactly.
But if they haven't had that, then no, they don't have have coverage for that exposure. So
and as we look at more IoT in the in manufacturing, that really opens up even more exposure.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Definitely.
So another one would be for businesses that own commercial property.
I like this one. This one's great.
This one's pretty fun. Many people who own commercial property may have already talked to their CPA or CPA group about this, but I still find people, even in larger groups, that haven't done this. And what it is, when you own commercial property, when you renovate, you reinstall flooring, walls, electrical, lighting, all of that is business personal property, as opposed to business real, which is the structure itself. So you typically depreciate commercial property often over 39 years. Take 1/39 each year as a little tax deduction. The personal property can be depreciated at 5, 7, or 15 year. What that does is put a large amount of immediate tax savings in the owner's pocket. Doesn't give you any more depreciation, just front loads it. And the new tax law, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act from December, that increased by a 50%, a double margin of the amount of accelerated depreciation that.
What's the max? I can't remember.
There really isn't a maximum. There are different ways it can be taken.
Oh, okay.
So you on the low end, typically we look at a business that has spent at least $750,000 on a property or $250,000 on renovating it. On the high end, there's no limit to it. Hundreds of millions spent on property can be cost segregated. What you need is an engineer to come in and break down the price of the walls, the floors, the lighting, because typically the CPA doesn't know that data. We provide the data, their CPA knows exactly what to do with it, and quite often, for example, I have a friend who owns a 5-unit apartment building not too far from where we're recording this now, and they spent $1.25 million on it. It's right near the light rail station, and they ended up getting about an $80,000 tax savings. They can put that towards reducing debt on the property, acquiring additional property, growing the business. There's no limit on what they can do with it. So businesses that have spent multi-millions on property or renovations are often sitting on multi-100,000, sometimes multi-million-dollar benefit.
How do I fund that project? It's right here, right?
Exactly.
I mean, you can find the money.
Exactly.
Where there's a will, there's a way, right?
Yep.
So, Sean, I could keep talking about all these cost savings, but I think what's really important for our listeners is how do they contact you to learn more? What's the best way?
Certainly. Either reach out to me on LinkedIn. My name is Sean, S-E-A-N, Covi, C-O-V as in Victor I, or you can reach me on my office line, 303-362-5130.
And they can always, we'll have the show on cobrt.com /radio, I believe, and we'll have the show posted there. We'll also post it via social media, and anybody can always reach out to me, Kristen Muzzy, or any of my team at Colorado Business Roundtable Connect and Collaborate Radio. So Sean, it's great to have you here and sharing all the ways that our manufacturers can add cost savings to their bottom line.
It was a pleasure to be here, and we only covered half of what I do,
I know.
so there's more to talk about.
Next time, we'll get you on again.
Sounds good.
Thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody.